thanks so much for being on when to speak with me. How are you doing today?
All right.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well,
I'm not sure if anyone that you ask that has MS, if they ever say how you doing today, they're like amazing, excellent. It's always like, okay, I'm doing okay.
I actually don't know a whole lot of people with MS. Um,
Okay,
like I know of a couple of people around me, like are there's quasi in the same circles, but there's only one other person that I've met that
okay,
actually has MS.
okay.
So
Um, for myself, I when I was first diagnosed, I knew a couple of people that were either friends of my parents, like, but that was only like one or two.
yeah.
And then probably like 5, 6 years ago, I joined a support group.
Hmm.
So I met like it was a peer support group. So I met a lot of people that way. But I hadn't met anyone who was around my age.
Yeah.
So it was good, but it wasn't good because I'm in a different part of my life than someone in their 60s.
Yep.
So I finally did. And so I'm happy that I did because then you're at least talking to someone who's has similar
In
part
the
of life.
same, yeah, the same
Yeah.
life stage as you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't like you have similarities, but I'm not in the same life stage as my parents.
Right. The
So
struggles are completely different
yeah,
depending on how old you are.
yeah, that's right. So you had told me when we were scheduling this that you were working today. What is it that you do for work?
I am a mechanical engineer
Okay,
for a medical device company.
okay,
Um, yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm still working full time,
that's good.
which yeah, I mean, I suppose it is. It's taxing though. Yeah, it's definitely it's a smaller company.
Hmm.
Call it high growth, high paced.
Hmm.
It's a relatively younger company as well, so
Right,
trying to keep pace with, let's say, kids that are half my age,
right,
essentially,
right. That's fair.
is tough.
Yeah. Uh, how long have you had MS?
This is 18 years now. I was
Okay,
25 when I got diagnosed.
okay, okay.
Um,
That's a decently amount of time. That's for
yeah,
sure. Similar to myself, I was 22, so we were around the
yeah,
same age
yeah.
approximately when diagnosed. Um, can you tell me a little bit about your diagnosis story?
Yeah, so at that time, I've always been a fairly active person,
Mhm,
or really active person. At
mhm,
that time, I was a massive hiker, backpacker,
mhm,
and I would take trips up into the mountains, 2 or 3 days at a time, go essentially live on the trail,
mhm.
um, come back home, restock, get some
Right,
more food, sleep in a bed, and then head back up again. I mean, that
mhm,
was kind of at that time, that was the lifestyle I was living.
right.
I had come home from one of those trips, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and I couldn't walk without holding on to something.
Oh,
My balance, literally overnight, my balance was gone.
mhm.
Couldn't drive. Like I said, I couldn't walk without holding onto the wall, a chair, something like that.
Mhm.
I felt like, completely drunk.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm 25, I'm active, I'm outside. I'm like, what could possibly be wrong with me? I'm
yeah,
like, this is just, inner ear infection. Made sense
exactly.
to me. I'm like, whatever.
Right.
So I waited a few days
Mhm,
and it got worse. And I was like, holy crap. All right, maybe I need to go to the doctors. Went to the doctor and he was like, it's probably just a sinus infection.
mhm.
So I spent about a month going on different decongestants and things to clear my sinuses. And with MS, over the course of a month, when you have a relapse or whatever, your body will recover from it. So my body started recovering from it, and that convinced him that he was right,
Yeah,
and that it was just a sinus infection.
right.
Um, I got 90% of my balance back, but not
Mhm.
all of it. And about 6 months after that, I started getting fuzzy vision. Like I couldn't explain what was wrong. And I'm like, and it was when I was super active at work or something, like, moving around fast and my body temperature would increase. I'm like,
Mhm.
my vision essentially looked like I was looking through a screen door, the color washed out and all
Right.
that. So I'm like, all right, time to go see an eye doctor now. Went and saw my optometrist. It was a young woman. She had just graduated school. And, the off chance I was like, hey, how close is the optic nerve to the inner ear canal? And she was like, why? And I was like, oh, because like 6 months ago, I had this like massive balance issue.
Mhm.
And she was like, you're going to an optometrist. And they did essentially there's a test that they do, and they kind of map your eye
Mhm.
and what you can see with your eye and not the visual acuity, but like they use light flashes to see what intensity you can
Mhm.
see. And there was a big blank spot in the middle of my vision.
Mhm.
Um, and instantly they called my primary care, who was convinced with the sinus infection. He said, "Go to the ER. And you're getting an MRI, and there's going to be a neurologist there."
Mhm.
And so I went and got my MRI. I was sitting in the ER.
Mhm.
Nurse comes over and says, "Yeah, the radiologist says you have signs of MS." And there I am sitting there, 25 by myself,
Yeah,
and that's what I hear. This is before cell phones and or at least smartphones where you could look something up, which probably
exactly.
wouldn't have been any better.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's how it went. And I saw my neurologist, and he said, "No, probably not MS." He's like, "I don't see anything on the MRI." And I went through the kind of the rigmarole that a lot of people with MS go
Mhm.
through of, let's do this test, let's do that
Yeah.
test, evoke potential, spinal tap, and after about 6 or 8 months of that, he was like, yeah, he was like, you have all kind of the earmarks of
Mhm.
MS.
Yep. Yep. Um, had you really ever heard of MS before this? Did you
No,
even know what
no,
it was?
nope, nope. I asked the nurse, I was like, what is MS? And she was like, she couldn't even answer me. So I was
Right.
like, here I am in an ER with something that sounds really scary.
Right.
Um, no information on it, no way to look it up, nobody to talk to.
Yeah, that's
It
not a
was
good
tough.
way to go about it. And when you were having like the vision issues, was it one eye or both eyes?
It was just the one eye.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so it wasn't like I was losing full vision, but
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, when you start losing vision in one eye, everything looks kind of wonky.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but it's still like I had no way to explain it. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just it's a I'll say it, at my time of being diagnosed, like, I mean, you look at the statistics from 20 years ago, and I didn't fit the profile whatsoever of
Mhm.
MS, back then. Now it's younger people.
Mhm.
It is more, you're seeing more men getting it. But
Yeah.
I mean, at that time it was, women in their 40s
Hmm.
was kind of the demographic that
Yeah.
was prone to it.
Hmm.
So, I was outside getting my vitamin D,
That's right.
super active,
Yep.
young, healthy,
Hmm.
male, and
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. What kind of happened after that? How did you deal with that, if you don't mind sharing? So, like, kind of what was after that? Like, you didn't know what it was. Nurse couldn't tell you. So
right.
then kind of like what happened?
I mean, it was kind of a whirlwind with the neurologist. I mean,
Yeah.
it was long ago. I don't really remember all the details
Hmm.
of it. I mean, it was obviously, let's do this test. Let's do the evoke potential and say, yep, there's a delay in, your vision getting to your
Hmm.
brain. So there's obviously optic nerve damage.
Right.
There was a spinal tap, which at the time, I'm like, the only thing you knew about spinal tap is how horrendously painful it was.
Mhm.
Like that's all anybody ever saw. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, you get the look. And I was so anxious about that. I actually made myself throw up before I got the spinal
Just to get
tap.
it over with. Just to get it
I,
over
w-
with.
I was just like, I was so anxious. I'm like, I physically got sick because I was so anxious about the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, and then they did it. I'm like, that's it.
Hmm. Yep.
It's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, that stuff happened. I mean,
Hmm.
and they did those tests, and I got that diagnosis.
Hmm.
I don't remember ever going through the stages of why me.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think a lot of people, I don't say I don't speak for everybody. I think a lot of people go through that. They get
Yeah.
angry. But I was just like, I don't know. I wasn't necessarily like angry or pissed off about it. I was like, okay, let's just keep moving on.
Right.
Um, there were you read the stories and it's like, oh, I mean, 20 years ago it was wheelchairs and you're not going to walk and X, Y, Z. And I'm like,
Hmm.
It's just, and I don't think I don't, at the time, I didn't process it at the time. I lived
Yeah.
through it.
Hmm.
Um, I would say not until recently, till I started, I've written articles about it and all this, until I started doing that stuff that I actually started processing it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more out now, like information about it, whether it be research, because similar to myself, like I've had MS for almost 17 years, and basically at the appointment when I was diagnosed, the neurologist basically said within 10 years you'll be in a wheelchair.
Right.
So I'm like, here I am like 22, and I'm like, whoa, whoa,
Yeah, you're like,
that's
what?
not the
Time out.
case. That's not the case. And they don't
Right.
tell you that anymore.
No.
And the medical advancements that have been made. So I feel like a lot of people aren't heading in that direction. Like there wasn't as many disease modifying therapies then
Right.
as there is now. So like one doesn't work now. Well, there's a whole range of them
Yeah,
now.
there's a slew of them. You can do
Yeah.
infusions or pills or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
when I got diagnosed, it was Rebif,
Mhm.
Betaseron, Avonex, and what was the fourth one? Started with a C.
Copaxone probably.
Copaxone had
Yep.
just come out. Yep.
Same with me.
So I was like, oh, they're all injectables. This is fun.
Yeah.
And I did those for about 7 years.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't have any problems on them, didn't have any
Mhm.
relapses, and I was like, I don't have MS. So like it turned into denial. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is all BS.
Yep.
And you get needle fatigue after a while, and I got lazy about it. And
Mhm.
I had some minor relapses.
Mhm.
Um, and they're like, all right, we're gonna switch medications, and they gave me the pill,
Mhm.
Gilenia.
Mhm.
And I wasn't any better about that because I was like, oh,
Okay.
it's a pill. This is gonna be so much easier.
Yeah.
It was so easy that I forget to take
Yeah. Yeah.
it. So as soon as they started talking about infusions, I'm like, let's do that. I'm like, and I have to schedule an appointment and I have to go somewhere, and it's only once every 6 months. And I'm
Mhm.
like, easiest thing ever now.
Yeah. Is that Ocrevus that you were put on then, or is it something
Yeah,
else?
no, I'm
Ocrevus?
on a
Okay.
Acrebus, yeah. And
Okay.
actually, I don't even have to go to the hospital. The infusion nurse comes to my home,
Oh, nice. Wow.
which yeah, I don't have to
Nice.
drive to Boston, which
Okay.
is a
I
blessing.
can understand that that would be a positive because I don't know how you feel after that, but I've heard from various people like you may not feel like driving yourself home, so you have to like arrange for someone else to go with you,
No, I
depending on
used
your
to.
reactions that you get from it, which isn't
Yeah,
always
I mean,
convenient.
I don't necessarily react to the medication. It's the steroids that I react to. I don't sleep.
Yep.
Like I'll get an infusion, they'll give me the Solumedrol with it, and I won't
Mhm.
sleep that night. And I'm
Mhm.
like, time to go to work.
Yeah. Yep. And has Ocrevus been good for you? Like, how long have you been on that? Has your MS been pretty stable when on it?
How long have I on it? 3 years, maybe
Okay.
three. I
Okay.
think so, 3 years. I mean, and define stable. I mean, I honestly haven't had a relapse in years since
Okay.
probably my initial symptoms and optic
Yeah.
neuritis. I haven't had a major flare. Um, but it's at the point now where things are progressing.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I'm like the whole right side of my body is kind of going numb.
Hmm.
Um, I'm losing functionality in the arm, the leg.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
If it's not too personal, like, what do your doctors think about that? Are they still like, let's go forward with Ocrevus, or are they thinking other things, or maybe
They
put like,
they've got nothing else for me. I mean,
okay.
to Sabri, you have the risks of PML.
Yep.
With that, I'm GAC virus positive, and not just a little bit. So
Yeah.
my viral load was high enough, and they're like, absolutely not.
Well, yeah.
So like I'm on what I can be on. I know. So I go to Brigham and Women's, and they have a new medication that's in trial right now.
Okay.
That is actually a nasal spray that they've been
Oh,
using on. Yeah, I was like, that's weird, but okay.
yeah.
Um, and apparently they've had really good results. I've only
Mhm.
had a couple people taking it, but have actually shown improvement in their
Okay.
symptoms, and how they've dealt with things. So
That's very interesting. I
yeah,
haven't heard of that one. I try to keep up with all the research, but I wonder if I haven't heard about it because um, the research is happening in the US and not in
Yeah.
Canada. And they don't have a lot of research here because in Canada, we need to double check to make sure everything is okay. So the medication you get, it takes us a little bit longer to get it.
Yeah.
So which is good and bad, I guess.
Yeah. No, so I like this medication. They Brigham and Women's down in Boston, they
Oh,
helped develop the medication.
okay.
And my doctor's trying to get me into the trial this
Nice.
summer.
Nice.
Hopefully get me on something that'll help me a little bit more.
Yeah, because Ocrevus is kind of like the top one that they have now.
Yeah.
What kind of symptoms do you really deal with on a daily basis? I know you said that you've had some numbness and some difficulties on your right side. I hear
Yep.
you. My right side is my bad side,
Yep.
hence right leg down,
Yep.
because my right leg is often down.
Yep.
Are those the main things? Are you dealing with like, do you deal with things like you're working full time? Is has fatigue come into play at all yet? Or
Fatigue, the last couple of years,
yeah,
fatigue has started to come into play.
yeah,
Sorry, thinking I just
that's
lost my
okay.
train of thought.
And just whatever
Um,
other kind of things do you deal with on a daily
yeah,
basis?
I mean, so I deal with the right side of my body,
Yeah.
so like loss of strength in the right leg. So I've got a limp from that. Longer distances. I use a cane.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because people, if I don't say anything, they don't notice. But I'm like, it's so obvious. I'm like, I always have a hand on a wall, or I'm always holding something, or like tracing my hand along something
Yeah,
that,
that's right.
um, and I'm like, nobody seems to notice that, which I find kind of amusing. Um, but yeah, I mean, the numbness, the right hand, the right arm, it's kind of going numb. So the dexterity there is kind of shot, and being able to use it for any sort of fine motor skills is
Right.
gone. Um, yeah, but the fatigue is something much more new. I mean,
Okay.
I deal with it. I think the hardest part about the fatigue is that people don't understand it. Um,
Like, what do you mean? I'm
it's
tired too. Just have a nap. You'll be better.
Yeah, right. Except that 6:30 in the morning, I take a hot shower and I'm ready for a nap. I eat a big meal and I'm ready for a nap, or something hot and I'm ready
Yeah.
for it. I'm like, and people don't get it. I'm like, yeah, I walked 2 miles, or
Yeah.
drove 3 hours. I'm like, I'm ready for a nap. I'm like, I think it's not just a physical fatigue; it's a mental fatigue as well. And I'm like,
Yes.
if you're focused on something for hours, it's draining.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I don't think people appreciate that enough for what it is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And how has your mental health been since being diagnosed or with these
Oh, it's
vague
freaking
symptoms?
horrible.
Yeah. Like it's like, don't be stressed because it has a negative effect on your MS,
Yeah,
but the MS causes stress. So it's like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll be completely transparent. I'm a single person.
yeah,
Um, I work full time so I can have health insurance.
right.
So there's that stress of, if I'm not working, I'm not getting health insurance. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
There's no easy path for me
Right. Exactly.
to continue.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just lost my train of thought again.
That's okay. Take your time. I completely understand. I
Um,
can be in the middle of something and then I don't remember a word, or I'll just randomly stare into space. And the person is like, well, you're not really paying attention. I'm like, I'm sorry. I am. I just lost focus. So don't feel bad about it at all.
um, so what was the question again?
Um, how is your mental health
Oh,
doing?
mental health. Yeah. So I mean, it that puts a lot of stress on the situation. It
Hmm.
creates a lot of anxiety. I think,
Yeah.
like, just the general anxiety of my future,
Yeah.
what that looks like in, trying to maintain independence.
Right.
Um, and how long am I realistically going to last, keeping
Right.
a job and keeping my
Right.
health insurance,
Yes.
and what happens when that ends.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah,
That's a hard one. And that's like we were saying at the start, like someone who's older, they don't get it because like, oh, I'll just take an early retirement.
Right,
Oh,
right.
I
Because
took,
they're married, they have a spouse,
that's
they
right.
have social, they
Yeah.
have a, so not social security net to fall back on a little bit.
Right.
Where, the U.S. healthcare system isn't set up for people
Hmm.
that are not retired to exit the workforce because
Hmm.
of disability.
Yeah,
You're screwed. And in the US, you essentially have to drain all of your savings to get Medicaid, and it's
yeah,
like, you spend your whole life saving for retirement that you're not going to see, and you got to drain it away so you can get really bad health care.
exactly. Yeah, I've been learning more about that because there's been a few other people who live in the US in like areas not too far from where you are. And it actually surprises me. I clearly don't know, and it's very different
Yeah.
between the two countries how it works.
Yeah.
Like some of it's yours is better, um, because I feel like you get in faster to see things.
Yeah.
Healthcare is provided for me, so I get on a list that's giant. So
Yeah.
you have healthcare coverage, you're like top front of the line. And I'm like, 700 million in line.
Yeah. Yeah. Take a ticket, wait
So
in line.
yeah, so it's just differences that there is. And I am medically retired because of MS, unfortunately. So I hadn't planned to stop my career in my 30s, but here we are. And there's nothing I could do about it because for me, the fatigue is my worst symptom.
Yeah.
And I even tried working from home, and it didn't matter.
No, it
It was
doesn't.
still too much for me, unfortunately. So it just is so different, and it's completely out of your control,
Yeah.
which is frustrating. I know life is unpredictable, but this adds an extra unpredictability to it
Yeah.
that you shouldn't have to deal with, in my opinion.
No, no, you shouldn't have to.
Yeah. Um, you're obviously, because I follow you on Instagram, very much into photography.
Yes.
Um, do you surf?
No.
Did you, or you just like do photography at the beach?
So photography actually started during the pandemic.
Okay.
Prior to the pandemic, I used to do triathlons and I was open water swimmer.
Uh-huh.
So I love the water, swimming in the ocean, being in the ocean. And when the pandemic hit, like all the pools got shut down, and here we are. I can't access the water. I have nothing to do in the water. There's no
Mhm.
pool. Got the camera, and I was like, well, I'm pretty adept at swimming out in the ocean,
Mhm.
so why not take pictures out there? So I'm like, I do a little research. I was like,
Mhm.
holy crap, I can get a housing for my camera. I'm like, people actually do this. I'm like, I've never seen anybody up here doing that.
Right.
Um, so I'm like, oh, screw it, we'll go do it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where it all started. I knew a couple people that surfed, and they gave me some contacts, and so I started getting out there and swimming and with the
Hmm.
camera and shooting out in the water.
Hmm. That's awesome. It's a good hobby to pick up, and I feel like everyone kind of needed or did picked up a new hobby
Yeah,
during pandemic where things were closed down. That's really interesting. What was I going to ask you? Have you been able to keep your same neurologist throughout your whole time with
I have.
MS, or have you had to switch, or how's
I've
when you're
had
dealing with that?
so I mean, my original neurologist, he was just kind of a generic
Okay.
neurologist at a kind of neurology clinic where they deal with, stroke patients or,
Okay. Yeah.
whatever other conditions were going on.
Hmm.
He wasn't an MS specialist.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't until essentially after Beta Serum,
Okay.
when I was on that, because I was having issues because I wasn't taking it regularly.
Hmm.
Um, that he recommended I go down to one of the MS clinics in
Yeah.
Boston,
Hmm.
because they had more access to more medications and,
Hmm.
just more stuff.
Right.
So I've had a few neurologists down there just because
Hmm.
they kind of, I don't say they circulate through, but
Okay.
it's a teaching school, so you end up with a lot of younger neurologists that,
Okay.
for one reason or another, they just move on.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've had the same one now for probably 4 years,
Hmm.
4 or 5 years.
Hmm. It's definitely better for you to be seeing a neurologist that specifically deals with MS because
Yeah,
they know what symptoms you're going to have. They've seen it in someone before and they know how to help you with it, whether it's medication or another way. I
Yep.
find I'm just wondering curiosity to
Yeah.
see how it
Um,
differs from where I live.
I mean, as far as I know, it's an MS clinic that's associated with the hospital. Like they
Okay.
specifically deal with MS patients.
Okay.
So
Is there any way that you do any advocacy work for MS or to raise awareness at all? Or is this like your secret that you tell some people, but you're not like, you don't really raise awareness? Is that something that's like that you do or not?
I don't advertise it.
Okay.
Like yeah, I think part of the struggles with MS and MS patients is that, at least for me, I don't want to be looked at as different.
Hmm.
It's like I want to maintain some level of normalcy.
Hmm.
So I don't necessarily I don't go shout it at the top of my lungs every time I meet somebody new.
Yeah.
But I'm not shy about sharing it.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, not that online profiles are kind of the end all be all for communication, but I'm like,
Right.
it's there. I mean,
Mhm.
if people are curious about me, it's there.
Yeah.
Um, and the people that know me that are close enough to me, they all know.
Yeah.
And whether they share it with other people, it's up to them.
That's right.
I don't care.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, I've had, a bunch of people reach out and ask me to write articles or, do other things. And I'm like, I never say no to anybody
Yeah.
that asks me to, share my story.
Mhm. Mhm. Have you done anything with the National MS Society in the US or not? Or
No, no, no. I mean, a lot of my MS, I've kind of just dealt by myself.
okay.
Um, most of my infusions, my neurology visits, it's
Mhm.
me.
Okay.
Um, it's just this is how it is.
Okay. Um, what would you tell someone who you may like advice, someone who was just diagnosed with MS? Think
Don't
about
believe
it.
everything you read on the internet,
Okay. Yeah.
because that's everybody's first thing. Let's go look it up on Google and see what they have to say.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's a double-edged sword. I mean,
Yes, it
you know,
is.
there are a lot of MS groups out there where people are angry.
Hmm.
People I'll say, I don't want to point fingers, but some people in my opinion, aren't handling it the best way they could.
Hmm.
Um, and I completely understand that,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it creates an environment of fear for everybody else as well.
Right. That's very true.
When you start sharing only negative things and
Mhm.
not highlighting, the people that have had it for 18, 20, 30 years and are absolutely fine,
Yeah.
are still independent, still walking, it
Right.
does a disservice to the whole community.
Mhm. I agree with that.
I think that's one of the other things that a lot of people don't understand is how heat affects all of us. I
Yeah.
mean, I can imagine you with fatigue,
Mhm.
it probably kicks your ass.
It does. I love to be out in summer. I love to go
Yep,
to the beach. Unfortunately, I spend a lot of my time inside with
yep,
my air conditioner. It looks
yep,
really nice outside, but it's like my brain shuts off.
yeah, yeah. My legs turn to cement. I
Yeah.
fall asleep, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the end of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I find that very frustrating. I didn't have that all along. So I was kind of taken aback when it
Yeah,
started. I was just like, what's going on? Why is every single part of energy in my body being sucked out because I was out in the sun for an hour? And
yeah,
then I'm like, okay, heat intolerance. Here we
yep,
are.
yep.
And I don't like,
Did
I
that
didn't
come on
realize,
recently?
pardon?
Did that come on recently, or
I would say in the last 6 years.
okay?
So like the first 10-ish years, I didn't deal with that. I was just like,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So it was like, what is this?
yep.
So my air conditioner is now my best friend in the summer anyway. So
All
once
right.
again, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I
I
appreciate it.